Hello everybody, it is Saturday the 14th of October. Hello Toby, have you come to say hello again? Welcome to this podcast, which is about my life in the fibre arts, my life and how the fibre arts help me in my daily life and give me some sense of... I'm sorry, I just realised the camera is actually pointing slightly upwards. There we go. That's better. Now you can see Toby as well. So yes, my life in the fibre arts and how the fibre arts have infiltrated every aspect of my life, really, for the better. My name is Jared, or Peter, or Boniface. I live in Abingdon-on-Thames in Oxfordshire, in the south of England, about 7 miles due south of the city of Oxford. I live with my two cats. This one is Toby. He's the one that's completely black, apart from a little line of white hairs on his chest there. And Bunty, who has a white lower face and a white patch on her chest, and 4 little socks as if she's been playing in a bag of flour. Are you okay? Yeah. We live together, and they keep me company while I'm carrying out my crafting and do silly things that make me laugh and curl up with me and bother me when they want to be stroked, because if I'm looking at a camera, then clearly I'm not really doing anything at all, so I should be paying attention to them. And really just make my life a whole lot more interesting, don't you, Toby? You do. There we go. So, in my life in the fibre arts, I crochet. That's my first love. That's the first thing I learned to do, really, in the most recent. When I was a child, my mother taught us to knit, but I didn't really pay much attention to that. But as I've grown older, I took up crochet about 13, 14 months ago, and since then I've taken up an interest in learning to knit better and in weaving, and I'm still yet to knuckle down and spend some quality time with my drop spindle to learn to start spinning, but I'm hoping to be able to do that very soon. What are you doing, dear heart? Never mind. So I have a wide-ranging interest in the fibre arts, I guess. I'm not a fibre snob. I'm very comfortable and happy using acrylic, 100% acrylic yarns, and very happy and comfortable using a £30 independent hand-dyed yarn as well. And it's very much a case of horses for courses. It very much depends what it is I'm wanting to make and for whom I'm wanting to make it. For people like my sister and my niece who've just had babies in the last month, they're both Ellie is now 5 weeks, sorry, Ellie is the older one, Amber is now 5 weeks old, and Alfie is 4 weeks old. They were both born on a Tuesday, a week apart. Young mothers need to be able to wash things easily, so I prefer to use acrylics for them, and modern acrylics are very soft and usable, so I don't have any issue with that. But I also like to mix it up and use lots of different types of fibre, but I don't mix them within the same project because it can lead to problems when you do wash fibres, that they react differently to being washed, and so you can end up with things becoming, parts of a project becoming looser and parts becoming tighter, and it all doesn't work very well. That's a good boy. That's right, you lie down there. There's a good boy. I've had an incredibly busy week this week. Largely, in fact, due to the commitment I've made to Vlogtober, where I have been recording an episode of my life away from the fibre arts every day, and It takes some time to think about what it is I'm going to be talking about, perhaps do a little bit of research so that I can get the information that I need and to jog my memory about things I already know, and then to film it and then to edit it and then for the computer to render it and upload it. Although I don't have to, I'm not really involved in that bit. I just set the whole thing in motion and it carries on by itself. So, but it is a bit of a time commitment. And for example, today's started out as a 10-minute conversation and has ended up as a 30-minute post that was recorded over a 2.5 hour period, because I walked about 7 miles in the making of today's Vlogtober episode, which is currently rendering and will soon, I'll get a ding and that will mean that I need to upload it to YouTube. But I'm enjoying that process because I said in one of the posts on Vlogtober, I'm very much using that experience to hone my editing skills and to try out different tricks, some of which will never be brought into this main podcast, but some of them may well be. And when I film these podcasts, I try to film them as a single continuous conversation. It's me sitting down for an hour, 45 minutes, an hour generally, and just talking about things that are happening in terms of what I'm doing and what's interesting me and what's piqued my interest that I may want to develop further down the line. So it's been a very enjoyable experience doing Vlogtober. Tomorrow is halfway through the month. It can be a bit of a challenge because I do find I spend a lot more of my time thinking about what it is that I'm going to be vlogging about. Because my daily life is, like most people's I suspect, fairly mundane and fairly standard. I get up at 5:30, I go to work for 6:30, I come home at 2:30, I have something to eat and maybe do a bit of crafting and I go to bed. And sometimes I will have special events or I'll be going out with friends or whatever, but generally that's the order of the day. And that isn't going to make particularly interesting viewing. I'm not sure that I would watch myself doing that. I really don't see any reason why anybody else would. So I do like in the week to try and think of interesting things to do. Sorry, my ear. There we go. The downside of that is that I have thereby sacrificed quite a bit of my crafting time. So that was a very, very, very long-winded way of saying I don't actually have any finished objects this week. I do have a whip, which I haven't shown yet. And the rest of the yarn for this is over there, but never mind. No, I will go and get it. It's only on the side. Please bear with me while I never thought to get the rest of the yarn out. So I will just pause. And I'm back, and that really wasn't long enough to pop in an interlude. That was about 10 seconds. So I've been working. I made my mother a cushion for her birthday, a star cushion. And I used this seriously chunky yarn, I think. Yes, I did. It was the seriously chunky yarn from Signet Yarns. And this, I've got my glasses here, and I'll just pop the lights on because it's getting a bit dark. Winter is coming, as they say in Game of Thrones, which means it's getting a little bit darker. Yes, so it's 100% acrylic yarn. The one I made my mother was yellow and green and pink pastel shades. But I've decided to make another one, but I'm using this kind of black, white and grey as the centre of the star, and then the purple is going to be the points. And I know that sounds very odd, but I sat for a long time and thought about this, and I did think about making one side with... So I've made the two centres. I did think about making one side with on the grey and another side with the purple, pink, and but I just quite like the idea. And once I sat for a long time looking at the two skeins of yarn, Wendy, not balls, skeins. I sat for a long time looking at the two of them together, and I just thought that it actually did work. Now, I may be completely wrong, in which case no great harm done, because it'll just sit behind me on the sofa, and nobody else ever needs to see it apart from those who watch this podcast. It will go up there with my YouTube video. Play button thingy cushion, Ujima flip thingamajig. When in doubt, make a word up. And so I've made the two centres. I now just need to make the 5 points on both sides. So that's 10 points, which are made directly attached, obviously, to the centres, and then seam them together and stuff them with some polyfill, and there's another lovely blanket. And the great beauty of these, of course, is that being chunky yarn, or bulky, I think in America, they are very quick to make up. They are quick to make up. They are very quick to make up. I'm using a 10mm hook, or possibly an 8mm. I can't remember which now. I know which colour it is on mine. So I think it's they recommend 8mm on this one. I think I'm using the 8mm hook. The only thing I've noticed when I'm working with a large hook and a thick yarn, like a chunky or a super chunky yarn, there's a lot more effort involved in crocheting, and I find that although the project itself gets big a lot quicker, obviously, because you're using a bigger hook and a bigger yarn and making therefore bigger stitches, at the same time it's actually quite laborious compared to, I normally would use DK yarns, so but I'm guessing that a worsted yarn, I use a light worsted, a medium worsted, such as worsted weight in the US, would probably be pretty much the same feeling, and it really is noticeable how much more effort is required to crochet. But I mean, not to the point where it becomes tedious or onerous. It's just something I've noticed. I do like the slight concave effect of these of the centerpieces. This pattern was Jada in Stitches, and I really liked. She did single color stars. I really liked the stars, but I'm being slightly more adventurous, and I'm fairly hopeful that although the join will be obvious because it will change from color to color, that the overall effect is of this variegated patchwork look. So I'm quite looking forward to completing those, and I'm hoping to get that finished later today, in fact. So I will be working on that. My other main work in progress that I've been working on is my pullover, which is tin can knits. I've done the body, and I've been prevaricating really about doing the arms. I did start the arm. I started on circular needles, and I found that very hard going. I was trying to not do magic loop, so I was trying to use full circular, but my needles were too long. I needed shorter needles on a longer cable, as it were. So I transferred to the DPNs, but haven't actually done any work on it until this week. And that was where, when this is a raglan construction sweater. This is the flax sweater on Tin Can Knits, and it's a free pattern. So I put my my stitches onto a stitch holder, not my niches onto a niche holder. This stitch marker is the point where the stitch holder rather, had been. So everything below that is the arm that I've done, and I've only done this for a couple of nights, so it's not a huge amount of progress. It's a garter stitch panel, and then with stockinette for the two undersides, and I misread the pattern. And this, I do blame Wendy for this. Wendy is always telling me off for writing on my patterns. And I mean, I understand where she's coming from, and maybe she's right. But I'm making the fourth, so you can make this from newborn baby, all the way to 4 times extra large, I think. I've not got the beginning of so they give you the measurements for every size from baby all the way through to 4 times extra large, or 3 times extra large. It's either 3 or 4. And I'm making the 4th largest size for me, because there is positive ease in the jumper, but I like to have a baggy jumper. I don't like to feel constricted. And I'm a large gentleman, so, you know, I'm not... I was sylph-like when I was young, but I hit 30 and then I just became like my father. And I'm not too worried about that. It's just be honest about yourself, embrace yourself, and move on. Anyway, where was I? Yes, I had marked my previous pattern with a highlighter to show which of the instructions I was actually following. But one of the cats, and I suspect it was Toby, yes, you can lie there sleeping as if you're innocent, one of the cats had decided to play with the piece of paper. And so the piece of paper was no longer usable, really, for anything other than lining the litter tray. So I printed out the page I needed again, but I didn't mark it because Wendy had just been telling me how awful it was when you picked up a pattern and somebody else had marked things. And of course she's right. But I don't give my patterns to other people, so you know, any markings on here would be the markings for the thing that I was doing. And I should have marked it and I didn't. So from where you pick up the stitches from the stitch holder, you're supposed to, on my size, knit 6 inches and then start the decreases. But Puddinhead here forgot that he was doing the 4th largest size and started making the largest size where you only knit for 2 inches and then start the decreases, because there are more decreases, so they have longer. I did 2 lots of decrease rounds, which is 1 decrease round and then 5 rows even, and then a decrease round and 5 rows even. So I've now resumed the 4 inches from this end of the second decrease group, and I've made notes on the pattern, Wendy. I've made notes so that when I come to this arm, I make the same mistake on that arm as I've made on this arm, which turns it, of course, into a design choice at that point. So I'm hoping really to get this finished in the next week, because we have been extremely fortunate for the last 10 days or so. Some of we've had spots of really torrential rain, but only for a few minutes at a time, and then it's been clear after that. We are currently dealing with the aftermath of the hurricanes that originated in the Gulf of Mexico. Following the jet stream and the Gulf Stream, they come up across the Atlantic Ocean and cross over towards the North Sea over the top of the UK. And because they're cyclonic winds, I've got it right this time, in the Northern Hemisphere, winds are cyclonic if in an anti-clockwise direction. In the Southern Hemisphere, they will spin the other way, so it will be clockwise in the Southern Hemisphere to be cyclonic, and anti-clockwise in the Northern Hemisphere. And if you're wondering why I'm making a point of that, it was in my episode yesterday for the Vlogtober, where I got it the wrong way around. Although I did say I wasn't certain, so I at least covered my bases there. So the storms have moved, and they weaken because they've hit landfall in the US, and they turn into storm force winds rather than hurricane force winds. But these make their way up the North Atlantic, and at the moment we've had the tail end of several of the hurricanes that have been hitting America and the Caribbean islands, and so they're pulling, because they're if you like, to the northwest, yes, the northwest of Britain. What they're actually doing is that the winds are being pulled up from the southwest, which means that we're getting much warmer, moister, but certainly much warmer air than we normally would at this time of year. We'd normally be starting to get winds from a northerly direction, and we'd be starting to get quite cold, biting winds by now. So it has been unseasonably warm, certainly where I live, and I understand from the weather forecast that I watched yesterday that it may even reach 24 degrees Celsius later this weekend, and that is extraordinarily warm for October. That would be warm for August, to be honest. So at this moment in time, I don't actually need my winter woolies, but it's not going to be too long before normal service is resumed and we go back to our cold, windy, wet winters. Wet, windy winter. That's an interesting bit of alliteration. So I really want to get this finished, get it off the needles, and I think that's... I know I started this, but I can get this done quite quickly, as I say. But I'm over the next few days, I'm wanting to really focus on getting some things finished. I'm almost there with several things, and it's just the finishing touches that need to be done, like the sleeves, which... That sounds, that's a huge amount of knitting, but it really isn't. Compared to the body of a sweater, the sleeves take no time at all because you've got less than a third of the stitches on each sleeve. So, it can be done, and it just, where there's a will, there's a way. Saturday night tonight, and that means Strictly is on the TV. So that's 2 hours of mindless, in a sense, entertainment where I can listen to what's being said while I knit, and then watch the dances for 90 seconds, and then listen. So it's quite a nice little program to knit by, as I mentioned last week. So, excuse me, I'm just going to have some water. So the work in progress that I want to really crack on with is this sweater and get this finished. So hopefully this time next week, I will have a finished object for you. So that's it in terms of the whips. There are little bits and pieces I've done and other things, but nothing of any consequence. I am still working out the recipe for the socks, so that I'm not going to show those until I'm confident that I've got the right recipe. The advantage of the afterthought heel and cuffs and toes, and I've started with the cuffs anyway, is that if I don't like it, I simply rip it out because the main body of the sock is completed. I've put a lifeguard, lifesaver piece of yarn in at the top of the sock, so that if I do decide I don't like the cuff, I can just rip it back to that and then pick up the stitches again without losing the sock itself and having that unravel, and so I don't have to keep working out the top line and where the stitches are. So that's that's a work in progress, and I think once I've actually, that's a project in progress, if you like. I think once I've actually got a recipe that I really like, then I can just crack on and really motor through some of my stash and start to have handmade socks, which will be lovely. I've been asked by Wendy about how I feel about the Addy knitting machine, and it's an interesting issue. It's limited. It will only do what it does, but it does what it does extremely well. So as long as you are happy to accept the significant limitation that you are basically limited to vanilla sock pattern, straightforward knit in a tube, into which you then add the character by adding the toes, heels, cuffs, and that's where the recipe can change, and that's where the interest can be for the maker rather than in the tube itself, then I think it's excellent. Would I like, yes, sorry, I don't know what that was. Cat hair, I think. I would really, really love one of these £1,500 cast iron Victorian sock machines where you can do all kinds of clever things, but that's never going to happen, at least not in anything like the foreseeable future. They look fabulous. I really, really would like to have one. I've watched Amber use hers and it looks fantastic. But that's not on the table. And I think, you know, walk before you can run. Get to grips with this knitting machine, understand how you can adapt things within the scope of what you have, and then you can move on to other things. So I'm happy with my purchase. It works well, it's robust, it works quickly, it gives me exactly what it advertises it will give me. It's not pretending to be anything it's not. And you know, there is also the fact that it will enable me to produce flat panel knitting as well, and that can be, you know, it's a bit like with the weaving. The product that you get, the fabric you get at the end of that first part of the process is not the end product. It is the means to by which the end product is made possible, by cutting and stitching and all the other techniques that we know, and adding to, and maybe, I mean, Crochet Luna Claudia asked, would it be possible to crochet heels, toes and cuffs? And that's a very good question. I have no idea. That's one of the things that I will want to experiment with and see whether or not it will, and whether I prefer that to the knitted toes, cuffs and heels. So it's am I happy with it? Yes, I'm perfectly happy with it. Do I think I paid too much money for it? No, I'm quite happy with what I paid for it. Would I like something better? Absolutely, but only when I can afford it and when the time is right. So I hope, Wendy, that answers some of your questions about the machine. Sorry, I seem to have some... Oh, I had popcorn earlier. I think I've got some cellulose in my mouth. Anyway, not cellulose, but you know what I mean. The husk. Anyway, right. I just want to talk about a couple of acquisitions. This first acquisition came about because of I was given a gift for my birthday. I just want to make sure I get the right one, that is. And the gift was a crochet hook. Plastic and possibly perspex. Probably plastic. And it's a very nice hook. It was a gift, as I say, for my birthday. And the really, really big thing about this is that you flick a switch and it lights up. And so it enables you to work in low light conditions and to see your work more clearly because you've actually got a light source which is within the work. And this was a size 4mm hook. And I've used it. The one thing to say about it is that compared to the aluminium hooks and the steel hooks that I've used, the yarn does drag a little bit more on this because it's not quite as smooth as metal would be. It doesn't drag an awful lot, it's just noticeable that it does drag a little bit more. But it's really useful, particularly when I'm sitting in here and in this corner, because it can be quite dim sometimes, and particularly if I'm using a darker yarn. So I got some Amazon gift vouchers for my birthday, and I went onto Amazon and discovered that you can actually get a range from 2mm, 2.5mm, is that? No, 2mm. So there's a 2, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, and a 5.5, 6mm hook. And they all light up. And the batteries are included. And the batteries are easily replaced as well. They're just these small circular batteries. And the back just clips off, and then you change the batteries and put them back in. I've got hundreds of these little batteries lying around the place in various places. So I took the 4mm hook out of this set, so that this 4mm hook is the hook that I was gifted for my birthday, and I've given Wendy the 4mm hook from inside here, and I'll be interested to know how she gets on with it as well. I did mention to her about the it's slightly more drag, but they really are very, very nice, and they're very nice to hold. They're not heavy at all, but they just feel quite nice in my hand. Most of my hooks, I've got the kind of plastic kind of cover sheath almost that the hook is inserted into, and these are plastic bodied completely, so it's a molded plastic part. But because it's larger, I find that the crochet hooks, for example, there's one here in my little crochet bag. I find these hooks, they're very nice to use, but I do find after a while that my fingers get very sore whilst holding this, because it's such a small hook. So I quite like having the bigger body that these have to actually hold on to. So that was my first acquisition. In fact, I ordered this pretty much on my birthday on Amazon, or the day after. It only arrived 2-3 days ago, so it's taken a while because it's come from Taipei, Taiwan. So the slow boat to China, as it were, metaphorical and literal. But it has arrived, and I'm looking forward to using those. So I have discovered... I also just wanted to show this cute little button that Claudia sent me, which is keep calm and crochet on, with a little crochet hook going through a ball of wool. See, Wendy, that's a ball, okay? I have discovered a couple of new podcasts, which is always a terrible thing because I always end up wanting to do what I'm watching. I just too many projects, and everything just crowds in on me. Anyway, I've found another couple of podcasts that I enjoy watching, and one of them is a podcast about the knitting loom boards that I have, and it's now come on, what's the name? Is it lumahat.com? So lumahat, but all no spacing, and then .com. And she has been giving some tutorials on making dolls with knitting looms, and they're really cute. So with all the babies that I now have popping around everywhere, I think I'm going to be making quite a few of those in the lead up to Christmas and to the new baby being born in January, to my good friend Claire. So yes, I've only with the loom so far used the E-wrap stitch, which is called an E-wrap because if you look down from above, it looks like the letter E as you wrap around the hook, and then the peg, and then you take it down to the next peg and you wrap around, and you take it to the next peg and you wrap around, and so on. And that produces a particular style of a stitch, and it's actually quite a stretchy stitch as well. But you can do normal knit and purl stitches on a knitting loom, and I call it a crochet loom partly because yes, it ends up with fabric that looks like knit because it is knit. It's just another way of knitting fabric, but you actually use a hook to bring the stitches over each other. So it is, as I've said before, it's a halfway house between knitting and crochet. And I've given a couple of things a go, and I've got a few ideas. So I'm hoping once I've cleared my jumper and finish my star, I'll be able to then maybe look at making a few little kind of rag dolls, but from acrylic yarns. And acrylic yarns will be perfect for that. And also, because I've got different size looms, I can make different size dolls. So little baby dolls and big baby dolls, as it were. So, I've got a few ideas buzzing around in my head as to how I might adapt a pattern to make it more specific for the thing I want. So I will be hopefully getting some time to do that. My colleague in the CCTV department at work is on annual leave for 2 weeks. Not next week, but the week after. So I'm going to be fairly under the cosh at work during that time. But I still have a couple of weeks annual leave of my own to take. So I'm hoping by late November, maybe early December, I shall be taking some time and really getting to grips with some of the things that I've been wanting to do. So I have... There's a second channel I've been watching, and it's a channel called Beadaholic, where the holic is spelt Holique in a kind of pseudo-French style. And this is a different type of fibre art in that it is a fibre art where the fibre is... Whoops, daisy, sorry, just picking those up. Is metal wire. And I've got, these are two different types of wire, artistic wire they're called, and these are 20 gauge, which means I think that they're 0.8mm thickness. Oh yes, it says so there. I can just about see that. I can't remember if it has the colours on here. I've lost my glasses. There they are. Bear with me a second, please. Yes. So, I could have probably guessed from the colours, but this is copper, which I think you can probably see is a coppery colour, and this is silver. And I've also bought a little loom into which I haven't actually opened this yet. Just hoping it's not got tape on. No, it hasn't. There we are. It doesn't want to open too easily. So there are these very thin steel rods, and these get placed into... there are 3 rings. There's an outer ring, a middle ring, and an inner ring. And obviously the outer ring is a bigger ring. And then you weave the wire around the silver posts. And I've been watching a few videos, and I thought I would quite like to do that kind of thing. So I've bought myself some kit. I've bought some beads as well. These are beautiful. I mean, these are beautiful. This would look lovely as a necklace or a bracelet in its own right. These are various different shades of blue. They're not glass. They feel more like alabaster. And they're not alabaster, but that's what they feel like. Almost like a soapstone kind of thing. And they're really very pretty. And then they're very inexpensive. Only, I think the 3 strands cost me £6. So they're really not expensive at all. And I just thought I would give... Oops, sorry, wrong one in the bag. I just thought I'd give a different fibre art, another... I think I can stretch the definition of fibre to be metallic fibre. And there are a couple of... I mean, obviously the YouTube videos always make everything look so easy, but in fact, rather than being easy, I would say it is relatively straightforward. The finesse is always the difficulty. It's a bit like with crochet. The method of crochet is quite easy. The finesse is where it struggles. But I also bought some finer filament. This is, I think this is 26 gauge, so this is 0.4mm gauge. and there are a few different colours in there. So I have a few different colours to play around with, because I just wanted to give myself an opportunity to see whether or not I enjoyed it. It didn't. The whole lot that I've got here, I think, cost less than £20. So it's not that I'm spending a huge fortune. But I've just got I just thought I would have a look, see if I enjoyed it. There's a few bits and pieces. I mean, I think because I like sparkly things. I do. I really like sparkly things. I like pretty things. And I smile when I get to play with lovely yarns, and when I get to play with lovely metals like this and lovely stones. As I say, no great intrinsic value, but I'm quite looking forward to giving that a go. I did jokingly suggest that I might try macrame at some point. This is a kind of on the way there. I've watched a few macrame videos and I really like them, but it's not really something that I would feel confident enough to be undertaking at the moment. So that's just an idea for the future. So those are my acquisitions, and I'll keep you up to date about anything that does appear. I don't think I've got anything else in terms of acquisitions. I notice on Netflix, so sorry, moving on to recommendations. I noticed on Netflix that new episodes of Riverdale and what's the other one? Designated Survivor have been released. So I tend to some of these are only released once a week, and I stop, think, speak. I quite enjoy episodic formats and the cliffhanger kind of ending to an episode, but I also really quite like saving up something special and then really indulging myself. So I'm in two minds at the moment as to whether I should start watching the episodes now or wait a little while until I've got several weeks worth of episodes, and then have an evening crafting while watching one or other of my programs. So I really enjoyed both Designated Survivor and Riverdale in their first series. I'll be interested to see how both develop, because they were quite self-contained first series in that, well, I suppose there were cliffhangers, but they weren't. They're not. Most of the story of the first series on both of them was resolved by the final episode. Actually, in the final episode, I mean, there are ongoing aspects, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not it becomes rather overkill or whether it's actually more realistic development. They were very good series last year. If you've not watched them yet, they're still available on Netflix. They're both Netflix original series, and they're well worth watching. I don't remember Archie and Jughead and Veronica and all the rest being quite like that when I was younger, but there you go. Everything grows up, I suppose. And in terms of everything else, I've spoken about those two podcasts that I've started to watch, but those are more tutorial style podcasts. There is another one, and I can't think what it's called. It's something about stash. Oh dear, dear, dear. I've forgotten the name of it. I'd written it down somewhere, and I can't find it. My mind has gone completely blank. I wonder if I can find it. I've got the TV there. I can go to YouTube. Sorry about that. I had to go onto YouTube to find the name of the podcast. It's Little Skeen and the Big Stash, and they both introduce themselves in teaser videos, if you like, and it's good fun and enjoyable. I haven't been keeping on top of my podcast viewing as much as I would normally, mostly because I haven't been crafting, and my crafting time is when I watch my podcast. So I know there's been at least one episode of No Catchy Name that I haven't caught up with, at least one episode of Legacy Knits that I haven't yet caught up with. I think the Grocery Girls have now published another episode which I need to watch. So I'm hopeful that over the next week I should catch up with these as well, and be able to enjoy my crafting once more. So this is a slightly shorter episode, and that's mostly because I don't have any finished objects to talk to you about. But I'm glad that you spend some time with me, and I hope that if you've enjoyed this episode and you're not yet a subscriber, you can click the subscribe button. And I look forward to speaking to you all again on the main podcast next week, but I will be continuing with my Vlogtober mini podcasts over the next 7 days. So I look forward to speaking to you all again whenever you want to spend time with me. So thank you very much, and bye bye.